Hi everyone, and welcome to the Efficiency Engineers podcast, where we ask the question, is there a better way? My name is Frederik Stallard, and in this podcast I interview leaders in insurance that challenge the industry's notorious reputation of being slow and inefficient. On the show today we have Clare Knight. Clare is the CEO and founder of DEX, a company that is on a mission to bring delegated authority to the future. She has a rich experience and strong voice in the insurance industry, working in different roles at Hiscox, followed by freelancing as an independent consultant at organizations like Brit Insurance and the Lloyd's Market. Clare and I met earlier this year at the InsurTech Symposium in Cologne, where we were talking afterwards at a hotel bar with an old-fashioned in hand. And I got intrigued by Clare's story. So I decided to invite her to the podcast where we can dig deeper on the challenges that Clare has been facing and what is driving her to go against the grain. So Clare, thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. And I wish that I had an old-fashioned rather than a glass of water this time.
Well, it's Friday, so
I know. Maybe that should be a thing. Maybe that should be a thing on your podcast in future. You do them on a Friday over an old-fashioned.
like a cocktail bar style podcast.
Yeah.
That's a really
that
good
would
idea.
be cool.
I love
That
it.
would be
I love
cool.
it. How are you feeling today? How's your day been? How's your week going?
Yeah, good. It's been a great week. Good morning. Just loads of calls this morning with my team. Lots of great strategy discussions. So yeah, it's been a good week. Thanks.
Nice. So, I'm really interested to know, you keep talking about the fact that delegated authority is broken. Tell me, what is the issue with delegated authority? I want to know, is there a better way? And maybe before we go there, for someone like me who has been newer to the insurance industry and not native to the UK market, delegated authority is also a term that I wasn't very familiar with. Maybe we should unpack first what it means, explaining it like a 5-year-old. I don't know if you know the Reddit term, but I think that's usually a good thing if you can make it understandable to a 5-year-old. And then we dig a bit deeper into the actual things you experienced and what made you like sensitive to those things.
Okay, no, that's easy to do actually. So, delegated authority is called a whole bunch of different things across the world, but it is a global means of distributing insurance. So, in really simple terms, insurance companies, so whether they be an INSCO or a syndicate at Lloyd's, is allowed by the regulator to delegate its authority to sell policies, to underwrite policies to a fronting agent, to a third party. So this fronting agent, it's an agency agreement. This fronting agent is allowed under a contract, which we call a binder or a binding authority agreement, to sell insurance to anybody within the terms of that delegation. And that can be any class of business. So that can be anything from a household policy being sold to you and I, all the way through to a marine or an aviation being sold to a big business, and anything in between. So that is, on the face of it, relatively simple. But when you add in the fact that claims more frequently are handled by third-party administrators, TPAs, when you throw in the fact that this is often global dynamic, so an insurance company in the UK, if it has the relevant licenses, can sell insurance via intermediaries in America, for instance, with claims being handled in America. When you throw in the mix a broker in that chain in between the insurance carrier and the fronting agents, which we call a managing general agent or a cover holder or a managing general underwriter, they all kind of mean the same thing. That all becomes very complicated, even more complicated when you throw in money movement, when you throw in high regulatory burden, when you throw in the fact that everything is currently being done on paper. And by paper, I do mean Word, Excel, PDF, email, DocuSign is paper, just saying, right? You're still putting a signature on a piece of paper, right? So that then creates this huge expense overhead in this channel. Typically, for every pound of premium for a policy that's bought through this channel, somewhere between 40 to 60 pence, if not more, if it's via the Lloyd's channel, is expense. And that's not acquisition expense, that's the carrier's expense and the broker's expense and the cover holder's expense of having to service this business because it's just wildly administrative. And that's always been a problem, and it's become a bigger problem because of the increase in regulation over the past sort of 10 plus years by the FCA. They've really they've doubled down on this stream because it's been rife with fraud in the past, and it's been rife with customer issues in the past, which obviously the FCA is very concerned about. So it's hard, so insurance carriers are finding it really hard to make profitable business in this channel, even though it's an amazing way of doing things for carriers, right? It means that they can access new markets very easily, they can access new products very easily, they can work with great MGAs, with great product ideas, with great marketing campaigns. There's the majority of really innovative insurance that's come out in the recent, the past decade has been through the delegated channel, because it's much easier for an external entity to rustle up and to hustle with a new idea, and a sexy platform and all that kind of thing, than it is an incumbent insurer. So it's a great channel, and it's really a source of the biggest amount of innovation, really, I would argue, in the insurance industry. So it's super important. But carriers in particular are really struggling with the expense burden of that.
I see. See, when I got familiar to the industry, one of the first thing that I noticed was how layered it is. Like, there are so many. It's like a layer cake of added value and activities, and somehow everyone accepts that this is also the best way to do it, probably because of many of the advantages that you just mentioned. Like, everyone is doing what they are best at, and I think that's generally a good thing. It's the power of an ecosystem, but it also makes it incredibly complex, and somehow I feel there are bottlenecks created, or there are inefficiencies created.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the thing is as well, because I love this distribution channel, right? I think it's great. That pretty much my entire, because I was a lawyer previously, so my bread and butter is I'm a lawyer. And I moved into the industry, X number of years ago. I'm not going to say that number. Age me. But since then, I've worked across the delegated sphere. I've been lucky enough to hold a good bunch of jobs at Hiscox across the delegated world, in both the syndicate and in the INSCO, the retail side of Hiscox. And then since moving, have been lucky enough to work with some really great entities out in the market, most latterly the Lloyd's Market Association. So have seen the sort of spread of the different roles and the different challenges and the different problem statements. There's a lot of problem statements, but the channel itself, the distribution channel itself, I love the complexity of it. I love the complexity means that you can innovate, you can do things differently, you can hustle, you can find ways of solving problems, right? So for me, it's not necessarily the complexity of it, it's the fact that there's no mechanism underneath that sits underneath that allows you to be innovative and to do things differently without then the huge burden. Because even if you're doing things simply, right, there's still a huge burden, and all we can do is throw people at the problem. And carriers have been doing the best they possibly can with the tools that they currently have available to them, right? And they've, we've seen a rise of some really great tech companies coming in to do things like bordereau management. And there's some companies out there that are helping to do due diligence and onboarding, but none of these things, match up, and none of them speak to each other, and none of them are doing everything that you need them to do, and they've not necessarily been built by people that know the space and have lived and breathed the space and understand the business side, right? And that's kind of been the problem really for the industry.
Do you see this changing at all? Because years ago, like, businesses were a bunch of people together. So the value proposition of a business is the expertise in the people and how they run their processes through those people. Now technology is like changing and evolving at an incredible pace. You see all of these insurtechs entering the market that are offering alternative distribution models, that are offering more data access, data availability, transparency. You see brokers becoming MGAs. You see other like identity shifts. So I feel somehow there's also changes being introduced into the existing model. But as I hear you say, or I'm wondering, are you saying that the different layers and the different parties and the dynamics between those will largely stay because of
Yeah,
the
so
core of how insurance works?
so there's obviously the classic, right? When you look at your expense ratio, there is the classic, well, we just need to cut the broker out, right? That is a classic knee-jerk reaction to how you lower your expense ratio. In most classes of business, brokers might be taking 5 points ish. I mean, in some classes of business, it's much higher, but across generally speaking, brokers are taking 5 points. Worth noting that brokerage over the past 5 to 10 years hasn't really changed either. Those 5 points or whatever points, they've remained pretty static. Despite the fact that brokers have had to do more and more admin, right? They're now acting like postboxes, which candidly they shouldn't be. Brokers should be doing, they should be a consultant. They should be customer facing. They should be looking at their cover holders' business and going, this is how we make it better. They should be working with them. They should, all of this really good stuff that brokers should be doing. They should be working on their cover holders' behalf to go out and find the best capacity and get the best deals for them. And it ends up actually that then after that initial process, they just end up being a post box for all of the stuff that needs to be done, all of the annual renewals and the due diligence and the reg returns and the data and like all the stuff, right? And actually brokers should be giving more to their clients. Clients deserve more from their brokers, I think, but brokers are just so bogged down now that, in my view, that I think some of them, not all of them, there are some really amazing players out there. You may have had one of them on your podcast previously, but they, who do think differently about this sort of stuff. And there are more and more of those players out there, by the way, that I'm seeing. So that's really exciting to me is that dynamic. But that's what we want to do with DAX, right? So with DAX. My aim with DAX has been to get rid of all of the guff and the nonsense, right? I'm kind of a bit, when people are like, oh, you're an Instech or, oh, you're an innovator or whatever, I'm kind of a bit funny about that because I'm like, well, I don't know if I am, because I think to me, this is just really obvious, right? And I haven't innovated in that I've created a new tech stack, a new way of coding, or, I've not created blockchain. I've not created, this isn't quantum computing that I've come up with here, What I've done is I've simply created a really streamlined way. I've looked at what we do in essence and I've just made that super easy. So the binder, right? I've just, because I'm a lawyer, so I look at it and I go, oh God, like the binder. For me as a lawyer, I came in the industry and I was just kind of like, what is this? So, and to me that's it's and then you sort of paperclip to the binder all of this really good stuff, which is all of your business plan and the stuff that you're doing together and your go-to-market strategy and like all of this really good business relationship stuff. You then kind of like staple it to the back of your binder, the wordings that you're using and then all of that just goes in a drawer, right? And that's true today, right? It goes in a Dropbox if you're lucky, right? If you're well organized, your underwriter's well organized, that'll get shoved in a Dropbox. But then you can't do anything with that. So it's like you do a piece of paper to then do another piece of paper to then do another piece of paper if you want to change your relationship, to then do another piece of paper when you want to transfer data, which then and all of this has to be rekeyed into systems, right?
Yeah.
And that none of that makes sense to me. So I was like, what if we just had one place that was just the system of truth, that you started in that system from a business perspective, right? And also it's because for me, it's not really about the tech, right? I'm kind of like tech is tech, right? It's the so what. It's the so what. For me, it's how can we make it easier for humans to come together in a global distribution like this? How can we make it easier for them to do business together, right? How can we provide tooling that's sexy and slick and that's a workspace that they want to be in, right? Because let's be honest, digital is now our workplace.
Exactly.
I think we've really come to realize this. And when we go into work now at home on the laptop and we're in like a crappy, like grey, boring screen, and then we jump over to Instagram or we jump over to TikTok or, we're on John Lewis' website or whatever it is that we're using that just makes our lives easy. and then we come into work and our lives are made hard, right? I don't like that. I don't like that dynamic. So that's the other thing that we're trying to tackle as well. It's just that how do we help humans to connect more easily, and how do we help them to do business more easily, and cut down their overhead at the same time. And that for me is the really crucial thing about what we've done with DAX. It's we've given you time, right? We've given you back time, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that you just don't have to do, right? Anymore. You don't have to do it anymore. That's what we've aimed for. And for me, it has to start with the human. It has to start with, what is it that you're trying to get to actually? What is it that you're trying to do here? And disassemble it a little and go, right, okay, well, what we want to do is really good business with really great partners, but we've got this regulatory burden that means that we have to know what's happening, right? And that makes sense, right? Because the capacity provider is the one that's got the pot of money that's paying the claims. So that makes total sense. In the past, what we've done is we've abdicated responsibility. We haven't delegated responsibility. That's massively changed over the past 10 years. But not just that as well. We want to, because I speak to underwriters all the time, and what I hear, and brokers as well, by the way, and what I hear is we want to add value to this relationship, right? We don't just want this to be here's our capacity. We want to work with our cover holder partners, and we want to give them stuff, and we want to, make things better for them and make things easier for them. So how do we do that? And that's the other thing that we've really dug into with DAX is how do we enable and empower brokers and underwriters to form this really great sticky relationship with their clients. So yeah, at the core of it, it's like a great system that is, reduces your admin overhead, and we save you a ton of money on that regard, right? Because we've just introduced really a bunch of different bits of kit, plugged it all in together, and it's all in one place, and it's easy, right? And we've kind of disassembled the binder so it's not hard anymore. We've made it streamlined so that all of the MGA's business planning goes into a system, so it's all captured, right? So and then if you want to change your relationship, you just change a field rather than having to endorse something, right? So we've got rid of that piece of paper as well. So just a whole bunch of paper that we've got rid of. But for me, that's all kind of like, that's the boring stuff, right? That's just that's the basics. We've done the basics, right? We've got the basics nailed. It's then the stuff that frees you up to do that excites me. That's the stuff that excites me. It's things like, okay, so we've got the basics nailed. What can we do now in terms of giving back to customers, right? What can we do now in terms of giving back to the customers that are buying from us through this chain, right? Can we, now that we've got a wrangle on our relationships, it's all in boxes, we've safely boxed our relationship, and we're getting, the data in, and we're validating it because we've got our relationship in boxes. What can we do about claims, right? People always seem to forget about claims somehow, despite the fact that it's the most important thing in insurance, in my opinion. And how can we then make things better on the claims side? Because TPAs have to be a part of this world. All of the stakeholders have to be a part of this world for it to properly function. So how can we get risk level data to claims at the point of a claim being made? And how can we speed up claims handling? How can we go look at triaging? How can we look at auto settlement because of this, right? All of this stuff then becomes possible. How can we start doing claims, predictive stuff around claims? And we do all of this by partnering, by the way. So we've created this like sexy hub where we've disassembled the binder and done some stuff like that. But then there's a whole other bunch of stuff that we're plugging in, right? And we just bring it all in. We interface it all in. It's all there for you. You don't have to worry about it. It's that ecosystem approach, and we're doing a lot of partnerships, and there's going to be a bunch of news dropping throughout the course of this year about those partnerships. And it's it's all about then how can we get into that like predictive analytics, and how can we get into that, we see a hurricane's coming through, can we ping a note into our insured's inbox to say, just to remind you, here's the claim number, right? I mean, we could go further, and we could go through to we could do everything through to looking at satellite data and seeing that their house has been completely decimated because we've put 3 words on the policy, so we know it's their house because we can pin it, and then we can pay it, right? But I know that unsettles a lot of insurers. But I think it's probably where we're going to start going once we start nailing all of this. But that's the stuff that excites me, right? It's all of the human stuff that excites me. Underwriters being able to spend more time with their cover holders and brokers, to grow business better, to do better business, which ultimately has an impact on the customer, right? All of this stuff is all about the customer.
Exactly. That's what I love. That's what I love about the insurance industry too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I was just going to say that's the stuff that excites me. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's all I was going to say.
I love it. I love it. And so for me, it sounds like you're solving this problem not because the dynamics are wrong, just because it's inefficient and not preferred, and it's lacking the right tools. But you're actually what you're saying is that the dynamics are totally fine, and especially we want to get more out of them. So in this first phase, I love how you said that it's really simple. Like you're it's really just about the understanding what is possible with technology. I mean, you almost downplayed yourself before, but I think easy is good. Like if it's easy, but if it's valuable, that's always a good thing, and that's how it should be. And then once that is in place and those dynamics are running much more efficient, much faster, and people are having the time to discuss between the underwriter and the cover holder different types of strategies, or as a client facing more time to spend with the customer, then it becomes fun to see what will happen if you enable people to start thinking more creatively about their time and about the impact they can make. And then if you can facilitate this from your perspective, I think that's the way to go. So I that's really cool to see. You mentioned a couple of other things that I want to latch onto, but I didn't want to interrupt. So let me see if my memory can bring me back to those topics. What I've experienced in the insurance market is that so people talk about processes, about technology, but where it comes down to in many cases is accessibility to data. Accessibility to the right data, to the right information at the right place can offer so much added value. And this this is the case for DAX, but this is the case for so many other opportunities we are working with. It's the same for Paperbox, right? We help provide more accessibility to data that is already there. So the actual work is already done. We're not changing the way again, like these stable dynamics between industry players, but it's offering those players the right data at the right time that can mean so much to them. And I feel there's a bit of it's a gap, and also the understanding that it's a gap is a problem. And you mentioned 10 minutes ago, I think you mentioned that like DocuSign and all of these things, they're still documents, and that's where I also see where I see this gap is prevalent. Is we hear from people in the industry like, okay, from now on we have a no paper policy, right? So they're getting rid of all the paper. I think that's good. That's a good start. But then everything is happening in PDFs, like computer PDFs. But the thing is, with a computer PDF, it's really good for a human to read. It's very difficult for a computer to read. Like a computer cannot see what's in the PDF, or at least not as default. So they're not getting rid of paper. They're just storing it virtually, basically.
Yeah. No, it's true. So there's actually two things there. So one is data, and I'm going to come back to data because it's an interesting one. The paper thing is super interesting because I know that there's an entity out there at the minute that are doing some amazing work on computable contracts. And you should have them on the podcast. Actually, they'd be great because they've got such a different perspective, and they're working with the Lloyd's Market Association at the minute, running a little proof of concept. But that basically turns policies into stuff that works, right? So stuff that can actually be read and do things, right? I'm not going to dive into it now because I'll let you do a separate podcast on it. I'll let you know after the podcast. But yeah, I'll connect you when it's okay. But they are doing some super work, and I'm really excited about what they're doing. Got it immediately. Want to work with them, right? So that's one thing. But the other is data, right? So for me, right, data is a customer problem. Data is a customer issue because data and the lack of consistent data across our industry is so expensive. It is the biggest driver of expense in our industry, particularly in delegated, right? In the DA world, it is a phenomenal problem. The majority of our insurance companies are unable to properly assess what their books of business are doing, right? That is just a fact. There are some that have nailed it. There are some bordereau management tools that are doing a really bang up job of processing that data and getting the facts back. But it's still a massive problem, right? It's still a huge problem. And that's because it comes in different formats from every single different party from across the world in different languages. And even when you're speaking the same native language, the insurance language you use is different, right? And Accord has been doing an amazing job over a span of X years, right, to try and standardize that, which they've had some measure of success in. They're now continuing with that success with the sort of CDR in Lloyd's, which has been long overdue. But we need to keep pushing that, because for me, data is a customer issue, and until we solve it, we're still going to be paying it through the nose to solve this problem, right? APIs become incredibly difficult. The transfer of data is incredibly difficult. I mean, we're doing it, on napkins and in CSVs, and often, by the way, still over email, the least secure means of transmitting very sensitive client information. I mean, it like mind blown, right?
Yeah, and you know what, that I like insurance carriers and brokers are telling me that they don't see email going away because they want to keep offering it as a flexible way of communicating to their customers. It's kind of this idea of the path of least resistance, right? Even if you have like a digital damage declaration form or whatever, the customer is still going to find a way to find you via email and send over whatever they need from you.
Yeah, I mean, look, hey, like having communication over email, I'm kind of all right with, but sending a bordereau with 20,000 lines of client data, that's problematic to me. That's really, really problematic to me. So yeah, we could definitely be doing better than that, because it's all there for us, right? It's not like, okay, it's the equivalent of what's happening right now with the environment, right? We're all sat here going, we've got a disaster coming, global warming, da 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 da. What are we going to do? The solution is literally in the sky, right? It's there. There's this big powerhouse of flipping gas throwing energy at us. Not only that, we know what the solution is. We've got it. We've got the technology, right? We've got solar technology. We've got it. We've got a big burning ball of gas in the sky. We've got technology. We've got wind in the air, right? We've got the technology. And yet we're still fracking, pushing more into, North Sea oil and gas, and it's like, it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. It's like, what's easy? What's going to make the money, right?
Yeah,
Follow the money. So yeah, it's kind of the same thing of, it's just, well, we've done it this way. It's easy. Somebody did say to me the other day, they said, it was in response to one of my LinkedIn posts, actually. They said, God, I wish you'd just stop banging on about how we're all paper-based. We've moved on, we've moved on. We use email and DocuSign.
Nice.
I was like,
nice.
Okay. Well done. Yeah. I wish you'd stop going on your disruptor approach. Fine, you do what you do, but please don't tar us all with the same brush. We use DocuSign. I was like,
But that means actually you're saying the truth. Like if people are if they feel addressed, then that means you're doing the right things.
yeah, it
And
was
by the way,
excellent.
I love your LinkedIn posts. Like
Thank you.
they're great. We only have a couple of minutes left. Actually, this is racing. It's been super cool, but I wanted to go back because I found it incredibly interesting that you mentioned my bread and butter was in law and being a lawyer. And you made the move to the insurance industry, maybe by coincidence. I don't know. I'd love you to talk about it. But this was literally you mentioned this was literally one of the reasons, like this lawyer mindset made you challenge this binder concept that you see was totally inefficient and had so much more to offer if provided in a different way, in a different format. So could you explain a bit more about yeah, about that. Like, how, first of all, how did you go from being a lawyer to being in the insurance industry, and then like shifting gears and going even deeper, like leaving
Building
behind
tech.
your leaving behind the whole lawyer thing, I assume.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then this perspective on yeah, what was going wrong, and other people like looking past it completely.
Yeah, so actually did law at university. So I read law at Oxford. I then did the classic thing of going to London, going to law school, went into a Magic Circle law firm, did my training contract there, and then I moved over to a London litigation firm that specialised in insurance litigation because I wanted to be a litigator. And I knew that I'd get much more hands-on at a smaller firm than the big, massive firm that I was at. And and I really enjoyed my time there. I had, amazing time. I did so many trials. I spent a lot of time in court, which actually nowadays for litigation lawyers in insurance is rare. It's just that my practice was quite unique. And yeah, had a great time. And then I sort of came off the back of two really big chunky trials over the summer and was offered the opportunity to go on to comment to Hiscox, and interviewed for that. Was selected. So in the January, jumped over to Hiscox and started working over there. But working with this amazing guy called Andrew Sellers, who was in sort of group ops, group claims ops, and we were a sort of dynamic duo together, really charged with the task of looking at the delegated relationships that we had in claims, and that was to any supplier. Actually, that was any third party that we worked with in claims. And again, the focus was the customer, right? Anybody that touches our customer that isn't us, Hiscox, they're important. This is important, right? Our customer is important, and if it's not us that's touching the claim, if it's somebody else, they better be certain that they're giving as good a service as we would do, right? And that was a global remit. So that was Hiscox group remit, and we kind of started with, getting the TPAs in order because that had all been done on the back of napkins. So we went through and we did a massive panel overhaul. We put in place proper contracts. And then we put in place like a proper governance structure and all of that kind of stuff. And then we started doing the same with all of the supply network. Now, all of this comes with regulatory burden, with expense overhead, with administrative overhead, because you've got to store all of this. And we were doing it in like this sexy Excel-driven file structure. And I was just really lucky that I was working with a team that was really dynamic and that liked to take risk. And I got allocated a tiny budget in tech dev world, and said, let's buy a piece of software that enables us to manage all of our third parties. That means that because I'm like an expensive resource, right? I wasn't doing loads of just crappy admin. I was also running an audit program at the time as well, because we audited all of these entities. So I was running the audit program. So I ended up doing really expensive resource, was just doing a load of crappy admin half the time, which, my job was to do like the serious contract negotiation, was to go out there, was to build relationships, was to make sure that they were, was to actually be that step up. And I was doing all of this, like, a good 40-50% of my job was just admin. So we kind of looked at that, we're like, it doesn't really make sense. And I looked at it and I said, look, a machine can do half the stuff that I'm doing here, right? So I was given the remit on the side of my desk, on top of like the million of one other things that I was doing, to build a bit of kit. And that we did. And that bit of kit actually is still out in the market, still being used by Hiscox. The company that built it for us, they have like spun it off, changed it into something different, but it's the core of what I built that they've spun off, and they've now taken it on to the next level, which is amazing.
Nice.
So yeah, and that's all around due diligence, governance, audit, oversight, onboarding, all of that regulatory reg tech stuff, basically. And that's where I started my tech journey and discovered what it meant to build something, right? What's it take to build a bit of kit? How much effort goes into making the front look so smooth, right? There's a lot of thought goes into that. And a lot of frustration goes into that. And so that was kind of my tech journey. And then went off and did a bunch of different roles at Hiscox. Moved off to become an independent consultant, and it's through that journey of being an independent consultant and working with different organizations and introducing different pieces of technology and understanding different parts of the problem, the problem statement, and then most latterly working with the Lloyd's Market Association and running Project Dare with them, around, what could ideating about what the future could look like. And a lot of these ideas have been generated, over the course, in the back of my mind, over the course of my career in Delegated anyway. And it just all kind of made sense to me. And when we tested it with the market, they were like, this sounds amazing. Yeah, like it's a no-brainer. And I know that people really want to work in this way. And people keep saying to me, they're like, because I say this to people about what we're doing with DAX, and they're like, oh yeah, this is obvious that we've needed this for ages. But if you'd have done this 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, it wouldn't have landed. People weren't adopting technology in the same way as they are now. And people say to me, oh, if it's so obvious, why hasn't it been done before? I get that a lot, right? One, because it's hard starting a tech startup, FYI. Just in case people didn't know, right? It's not, there's a lot of glamour around this founder story. What's ignored is the stress and the hard yards, and raising money and then keeping investors happy, and building a piece of kit that's never been built before and never been tested before, and you don't know if it's going to land, and everybody's got an opinion, right? There's a million and one different ways that you can go, and which way do you go that's going to guarantee success? It's like it's crazy. It's a crazy journey. So one, it's really hard. Two, you've got to go unpaid for a ton of time, right? Which if you're that magic person that has the relevant experience, and you know what the solution is, and you've got experience and understand how to do a tech build, generally speaking, you're of a certain age and you've probably got, kids, mortgage, school fees, cars, holidays to pay for. You can't afford to take, you're on a good bonus, right? You can't afford to take a year or more unpaid, right? And take this massive risk.
There's a significant opportunity cost for sure.
Yeah, there really is. So that's the reason, I think, is simply timing and right person, right place, right time.
Exactly.
Is what I think.
That's what they say are the biggest, let's say, at the start, success factors of a new tech startup is the combination of team, ID or product, and timing. And if one of them is off, like you can build the most amazing product at the wrong time, and then you'll still fail. And there are plenty of examples of that. So talking about team or person, as you mentioned, like your experience speaks and makes you the right person. But I also feel that you're working for Hiscox, and you are thinking for them, right? You're saying, hey, I'm this expensive resource spending so much of my time on admin. Why should you care? I feel it's also a mindset kind of thing. So I'm wondering what kind of person is Clare Knight? Like how would you describe yourself?
Well, also, I don't want to do the crappy admin, right? It wasn't the cost.
Very true.
It wasn't the cost. I didn't want to do crappy admin. I wanted to, for me, I don't want to spend my time in front of a computer filing documents and changing a spreadsheet every time one email comes in. And, I don't want to do that. I don't spend my time, track changes on a bloody Word document, back and forth, but print it out, sign it, scan it in, right? Who wants to do that? Who wants that as their job?
Nobody does, but the reality is different.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. So I suppose I'm just the sort of person that pushes back. So I think I've always been a bit of a contrarian. I've sort of spent a bit of time recently thinking about what my values are in life, because I think if you recognize what your core values are, so maybe you've got 3 or 4 really core values, and then the decisions you make and the directions you go.
What are they, your core values?
So for me, it's contrarianism, freedom, and human connection. So they're the 3 big things for me. So freedom is like freedom to make choices, freedom to travel, freedom to move, and then contrarianism is just I've always pushed against a little bit. I've never been afraid of speaking my mind, I suppose, and not being afraid to be different. That's never really been a problem for me. I'm from Yorkshire. We speak our mind, and it doesn't matter in Yorkshire that you speak your mind. And then I went to Oxford, and it did matter. So then you have to like grow a new skin of, okay, people don't necessarily like it when you disagree with them, or whatever. And that continues through life. I think people it's a really odd thing, right? So contrarianism is a really odd thing because humans are neophiles, right? They love novelty. They love things that are different. It's just the very core of humans. And yet, if somebody is doing something different or pushing against or not being part of the tribe or, doing something new, they push against that. It's like a really weird human thing, right? It's that whole like tribe versus like instinct. I don't know, like other instinct for things that are new and shiny. But I've always been that person. I've always been that person, I suppose, that is just doesn't mind saying things that are contrary to common thinking. Because
I
I'm
heard I heard
quite
like
thick-skinned.
there's this life coach. His name is slipped away. Like my memory is shit anyway. But he mentioned like there are some elements that are drivers to happiness. And two of those elements he mentioned is one is you need certain level of certainty in your life to have like a basic level of happiness. But then you also need a certain level of uncertainty to have a basic level of happiness, because that's what people need, and for different people have different balances. So if you're a contrarian and you value freedom as much, then I could probably safely conclude that you are well adapted to levels of uncertainty and more sensitive to like a situation of that is too predictable, that is too certain, and you'd get anxious really
Ooh,
fast.
that's very astute of you. That's very astute of you. Yeah, so I don't thrive well in a BAU environment. I stagnate. I've got to move. Yeah, I've just got to keep moving. And that's definitely a thing for me. And then the big thing is human connection. So that is a huge thing for me. And I look at there's this concept called the red thread of happiness through when you look at your job, when you look at anything actually in life, but when you're looking at your job, finding that red thread. And for me, the red thread is humans. Um, and that's one of the big things. So why would I rather not be at my desk and actually out with my suppliers when I'm at Hiscox, for instance? It's because my red thread is human connection. I want to be forming great relationships with people, because I think that great relationships mean a better outcome. Frankly, I think it's the core of humanity, is that human connection, and I probably that's what's driven Dax. It's that it comes from that. I know that I don't want to do crappy admin. I know that I want to be out there forming great human connections with people, which ultimately is for the benefit of everybody. So I mean, that's very astute of you to dig into that. Actually,
No, it's because I totally relate. Like I'm very similar. So I've been saying if anything, I'd want my job to evolve to be even less on the laptop and more just engaging with people. Like if I could do my job without having to do anything on my laptop, I would see that as an improvement for the same reasons. Like I get my energy from working with people, and those can be external but also internal, as long as there's like the worst thing for me is this what they call deep work, and you're working on one project for half a day or a full day. I mean, I can't do it. I feel I don't know anymore how to do it. I used to.
yeah,
I also wrote a
I
master
used to.
thesis and whatever, but
Yeah,
I got so used to this like mode of operations of constant like adjusting to signals,
yeah.
interpreting new information, trying to understand your counterpart, and finding enjoyment in that.
Yeah. Well, like again, that's all part of the joy of sales, isn't it? Like when you're out there and you're interacting and that's been the biggest joy for me of launching the product, right? Has been right, finally, I can get out there, I can do the thing that I love, right? I can get out and it's human connection and it's, jumping around the city from one coffee meeting to the next demo to the next conference, right? To new people, new ideas, new concepts. Because the more people you meet and the more views you get, the more ideas you come in. Someone says something, it sparks something in your brain. You visit a different country and you speak to somebody that's had a different experience, and it sparks something else, and your brain starts whirring in a different direction, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I 100% understand that. Claire, it's been lovely. We have to wrap up, unfortunately, but I enjoyed this so much. Thanks for being on the show again. And good luck with your business. Good luck with Dex. I think you're doing amazing work. A lot of people are, I'm sure, looking at you in awe, thinking, "Oh wow, that makes a lot of sense, and it's so easy. I want
Thank
this."
you.
So I'm yeah, 100% supporting what it is you do. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on. This has been awesome.